The sikha we're going to learn tonight is with the sikhas Chelik Yud Zayin, the third sikha to Parshas Behar. When a Yid hat sich verkauft als a Eved zu Anochi, when a Yid sells himself as a slave to a goy, zog the Posik says like this: Geula Tialei, he should have a redemption, in which he should be redeemed. Echad me'echad yigalen, one of his brothers should redeem him. A Deidei, a Ben Deidei yigalen, or his uncle, or the son of his uncle, which means his cousin will redeem him. A Mishep Sorei, or from other relatives, the Gamer, etc. Or he himself will get money and he will redeem himself. Why did he sell himself? Because he didn't have any money. So maybe he'll get money himself and he'll be able to redeem himself. And for them, Seder and Posik, and from this order in the Posik, where the Posik starts off by saying Echad Mecha, one of his brothers. Then it says Deidei, Bendei, his uncle. Then it says his cousin. Then it says Meshep Sara, the other relatives. Lentman up from that, the Kenim learns out as a Koref Kenim, that the one that's closer relative, he has first obligation, so to speak, to redeem him. The Korabas is Nanter, is a freer, it's a Gales and the Mevet. The relative that's closer, he is first to redeem this Evet. So the Rebbe says, that from Fashtein, we have to understand. Then the Nimker Lenochri Alein is Namatzef and Isiga Yodei, if the one that sold himself to the Goy is in a situation where he now can afford to redeem himself, he said, so it's understood that he comes before all the relatives. We bow the Posik Rechan to the Krevim, like say there, where is Kedem Lagula, and since the Posik is mentioning the relatives according to the Seder who comes first to redeem, so first should have been written that when he can afford, he should redeem himself. And then, if he can do it himself, one of his brothers, a dada, his uncle, etc., etc. Why is mentioned that if he is able to do it himself, that comes after the Torah mentions the redemption that comes through the relatives. He should be the first one mentioned. He's the closest relative to himself. So if it goes in the order who's closer, it goes first. So he should be first. That's one kasha. Second kasha. Since the Posik mentions many relatives, and in the order that whoever is a closer relative, he comes first. But there als ersten Korev gedar zogen Oviv. So the Torah should have mentioned the first relative is his father. But said mer Korev, he's a closer relative even than his brothers. Be the din by Yerusha, as we find when it comes to the laws of inheritance, as a person doesn't have any children, so then who's the next one in line? The father. Then comes the brother. So we see the father is considered a closer relative. So the Torah should have mentioned the father. And actually the Torah doesn't mention B'chal that his father could redeem him. Why doesn't the Torah do that? So we have two kashas. Why is he not mentioned first? And the second kasha, why is his father not mentioned at all? The Zelba Shaila Frekman in Parshas Nachlas. The second question, why the father is not mentioned, we also find that they ask, when Forshim asked, when Ramban, Rabbi Bachai brings it, is concerning the Parsha in the Torah, which talks about Nachlas, about the inheritance. Would their Posik Rechan them say that for Yerush Sakrivim? Where the Posik in Parshas Pinchos mentions the order of the Yerusha, of the inheritance of relatives, the relatives who inherit. The Posik says like this: each kiyomus obey namely, if a person dies and he has no son, then you pass on the inheritance to his daughter. Then if there's no daughter, then it goes to the brother, then it goes to the brothers of his father. Then it says the to the relative who is close to him, etc. There also the Torah does not mention the father. As we said before, the din is that the father comes first. So the father is not mentioned there at all. So at the same kash over there. And the Meforshim answer, Rabban answers, as der brocha yidaber, Leib noch rosim, that the Torah talks in a situation which is good, a brocha, but not in a case which is people are cut off. In other words, a place which is in a situation which is a negative situation. The Posik retnit wegen afal from Peronius. The Torah is not talking in a case of punishment. The ben is mes b'chai yodit. In order for the father to inherit from the son, that means that the son died before the father. That is not natural. That's a Peronius. That's a punishment. The Torah doesn't mention the father. The Torah doesn't want to talk in the case of something that's negative. That's what the Torah doesn't mention that. So the Rebbe says, Ober. So the question is, can we answer this answer here? So the Rebbe says this. First of all, even to answer it over there, it's not completely clear, simple. Since it's inyonim which are important portion to halacha. But you have to know what happens if a situation like this, which is unfortunate, but what happens if that did take place and the son died before the father? Who gets the Yerusha? So we have to know the halacha. But the churek anortni surah islosen oviv to look them. So it's not as clear that we should skip the father to the demva says it's not derech brocha because it's not in derech of a brocha. When it comes to halacha, it has to be clear. As the Rebbe says in order 12, that we find the Torah tries to always write a nice expression. But when it comes to halacha, you have to be very clear. So sometimes the Torah writes, when something is tummy, the Torah uses the word not Torah. But when it comes to tell you halacha, it doesn't be around the bush, so to speak. You should figure out because it's not so pleasant to use such a lashon. Torah says tummy. So here too, since it's negei halacha, it has to say clear. Befrata does gita nefshoris letoes as the rabbis need kanyedish, especially here. Not only it's not clear in halacha, by not writing the father, someone could make a mistake and think that the father taka doesn't inherit. So even over there, the teres is hard. He's been needing the dan. In our case, was retzich nicht wegen hamatzef in the in our case, were to mention the father has nothing to do with the son dying before the father. But the posek, so here you can't answer that teretz that because he doesn't want to talk in a negative situation. Here it's not negative. It doesn't speak about the Yerusha, doesn't speak about the son dying before the father. So the posek should have said, and the first, the Medina, the Rabbi Skedim Lagula, that the father is the first one to be the one to redeem this Ebbe who sold himself. The Rebbe says, "Kem das Varis abehegtem as Chazal sagen." You could explain this by first bringing in what the Chazal say. At the parshias from their seder kommen ala seder. The parshias of this seder goes on an order. It goes certain dinim in the parsha. Sie beweisen dem Seder a Yeride Rachman U'Islam was can kommen durch nicht abhitten in the mitzvah viele nor afkof and shviyas. It talks about Shemitah, and then it goes on to things if you sell this, if you sell that, sell yourself for an eved. So that's all showing the Seder of how you could go down if you don't keep the mitzvah of shviyas, and not only the mitzvah of Shemitah, the mitzvah, even the avak. Avak means not the real full-fledged avera. Even for that, what could happen? There's an order. What could happen? 3 years as Geirim, as there is Mecher, as Metaltal. If you go in the order of the Psukim, first thing it talks about selling your possessions. That's the first thing that happens if you don't keep Shemitah. Then it goes from one lower level to another low level. God forbid he comes down to the lowest level. If a cave to Anochi says you could sell yourself to a goy. That goes first, you sell yourself to another Yidden. These are all levels that go down as a result of you're not keeping the mitzvah of Shemitah. And it goes further that it's the case that you sell yourself la'eker mishpachas geir. That means the smeint l'aved zora atzma. It means you sell yourself to the aved zora, to the idol. Lias l'shamish. As the Rebbe blinks on, it's not that you sell yourself as an eved to the idol, but you become a shamish. You become a servant working there in the church, so to speak. So this is the Torah telling us the Yerida, the Gashmi is what happens to you. If Ashtandik and Pashta is, it's understood simply. It does not Yerida in Gashmis. Not only that you're descending in your level in Gashmis. As a Musfa Keif now Zayin Nechosim, that you have to sell all your possessions, Isafar Keif and Zichalein, till finally goes lower, you sell yourself, and then you sell to a goy. It's not only the physical part of it. Nor as Mavaista, Vakaseidik and Yerida and Shvala Matzev, Beruchnis. It shows Seidik lower, how you go from one level down, Beruchnias. So the Gashmasdik thing that happens to you, that you lower yourself, is a reflection of the Ruchnias. And this is selling yourself, all this shows a Yerida in Ruchnias. He should sell himself to a goy is number one, that's Hepech HaTorah. It's against the Torah. That's so definitely a descent in your Ruchnias level. Then you're not allowed to sell yourself to God. And the second is, this is a matzah, was es gibt an Ort. If you sell yourself to a goy, there's a possibility for a person to think, as Rasha says, if a salka for a thought, and hail, but a person might say, hail, but Rabbi Megalaraya, since my master was a goy, could do adultery. My master is Eved Avodah worships idols. Mechal Shabbos, desecrates the Shabbos. Afanika Meis, I could do it too. And the Rebbe in a different sikha explains why there is such a thought. So selling yourself to a goy not only is an Aveda in itself, it could lead you to think that you could do all Avedas. This is if you sell yourself to a goy. Certainly when you sell yourself to the Avodah Zorah, to the idol, being an Eved to the Avodah Zorah itself is that Heipech Mamach is the complete opposite from Lidnei Yisrael Avodim, that the Yidden are servants to the Eibishter. So these levels, not only are they Iridas Begashmi, shows what you have to do in Nebuch, you have to sell your things and you sell yourself, and you go, it goes lower and lower. Begashmi is, it shows also that you're going down in a very low level. Beruchnius. How could the Yid go so low? Beruchnius, to sell yourself to the Avodah Zorah. Heipzich das under meat, so this all starts with is because you tore yourself away, separated yourself, God forbid, from your Father in heaven. If you forget about your Father in heaven, obviously you forget to love him. Because if you don't realize he's your father, then you don't love him. If you know he's your father, then there's a natural love between a child and a father. You'll have the love to the Eibishter because he's your father. But if you forget, you separate yourself from knowing that he's your father, so then you won't love him. There's a posuk in Tanakh in Malachi, it says, Ben Yechabed of, a son honors his father. This is the Novi complaining. And if I'm your father, where's my covet? Why don't you give me honor? That means if you forget he's your father, then you don't give him honor. So everything starts with forgetting he's your father. Now, Iruchni is, what does that mean? Loshen Achsidis, if you're going to use the Loshen Achsidis, Ba'im is nito begilu depchina from Zayin Av, by Chochmah Shebanefesh. Now, we learn in Tanya that Chochmah and Bina, Chochmah is like the father, Bina is like the mother. And Tanya explains because they give birth to Midas. So you have Chochmah and Bina. The father is Chochmah. Now, Chochmah means Seichel. It's a level of seichel, level of understanding. But it also says in Tanya that Chochmah represents the bittul a Yid has to the Eibishter. And that shines in the Chochmah Shebanefesh. The way it is in Masber, bittul, Chochmah is a level of bittul, as he explains there in Tanya, and the bittul to the Eibishter is in the level of Chochmah. So when you're missing the recognition that this is the Eibishter is your father, the bittul to the Eibishter, that means there's something missing in your Chochmah. So you're missing the Chochmah. And Chochmah is considered father. The Alter Rebbe is Masbir Mevai Baruch in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, Adisibe for was Sayyid Kadevers on the alien, the cause. What could bring that the Yid should go against Hashem's will is Vail Zayin Chochmah Shebanefesh, because the Chochmah is Nefesh, which represents the Emunah Hashem. The Emunah you have in the Eibishter was his Hecher from Das Vasoge, which is higher than grasping, higher than understanding. And again, even though the word Chochmah usually goes in Seichel, but the real level of Chochmah represents the Emunah that you have higher than Seichel. That's the beginning of the Seichel. Before the Seichel yet, you have this Emunah. So the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, how could a Yid be over on the Rotzen of Hashem, the will of Hashem, is if you're Chochmah Shebanefesh, which is the Emunah, the trust, the faith in Hashem, which is higher than Das Vasoge, is B'china Shina. He says, it's a sleep. Sleep means those you don't feel it. But Mela, the Hertenit v'durcheder Avere. So if you, that's the sleep, that feeling that he is your father, that means you have the Emunah Deibish is sleeping. So you don't feel that through every Avera, Afila an Avera Kala, even if it's a light Avera, that the Nifrit, Betachlis, Apirit, Miyachudi, Vachus, Yisborach, you separate yourself, Betachlis completely, Betachlis Apirit, with the complete separation from the unity of Hashem. This is the Lashonis of Tanya. So if you don't have the Chochmah Shebanefesh, it's asleep by you, then you could do Averas. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do Avera. Volter der Hertas, durch der Avera, wird man Nifrit von Yechusa, Vachus, Yisborach. If a person would feel that through doing an Avera, he becomes separated from the unity of Hashem, punkt vidurch Avodah Zorah, same way as when you do Avodah Zorah, see by Avodah Zorah, everybody knows and feels that if you worship an idol, you're separating from Hashem. But when you do another Avera, you don't feel it. Actually, it says this is the Ruach Shtus. It says a person doesn't do an Avera unless he gets a Ruach Shtus. a spirit of stupidity. What's the stupidity? That you think that if you do an Aveda, you don't separate from Hashem. Mele by Avodah Zarah, you understand. Had a person realized that by every Aveda that you do, you separate yourself from Hashem the same way as for Avodah Zarah, he would be able to withstand the test by not doing Aveda with the same strength that he withstand the test of doing Avodah Zarah. The Erun Yederida for the Kalsha Bekal and Pesha Yisrael, just like every Jew, even the lowest of the lowest, Pesha Yisrael, even the one do Avedas, they will go give up their life for the holiness of Hashem, Belishum, for Kiddush Hashem, Belishum Das is oneness, without understanding and thinking. They feel, when it comes to Avodah Zarah, that it's impossible to deny Hashem. And the problem is that you only know that by Avodah Zarah, you forget when it comes to other Avedas. So it comes out that the reason a person could go down in level in Ruchnius is because he forgets that the Eibishter is his father. What says forgets? It's B'Bchina Shina, like it says in time. It's asleep. He doesn't feel it. With Mele, he could go down the Ruchnius. He's moving the Tam Pnimi, Basovi Vetni, the Mondo, and in Parshas Nachlas. This explains why the deeper pshat, not a simple pshat, the pnimistic pshat, why the father is not mentioned, not here, about redeeming him, this Evet who sold himself to a goy, redeeming him from the goy, and also not in Nachlas, it's not mentioned his father. Why? The Inyan Amisa, the Ruchnius, when we talk about death, Rishoyim Shebechayim Kriyim Mesim, we know that Rishoyim, even in the lifetime, they're called dead. Or the Bedakas Yeser in the more refined level, man the Nochas Medarge Korim, he says someone who falls down in level is also called death. So this concept of spiritual death, which is the union of Avedas, Nemtzer der Fun was as felt der Gedenken der Movische Bashamayim. It comes the fact that you don't remember your Father in heaven. Der Gilui von Chochme es Chochme Shebenefesh. The revelation of the Chochme of your Neshama, which is the Av. So if you don't have that Chochme Shebeneshama, which is the Emunah, then you could go down. Then that brings death. Ruchnistic death. Das ist B'china Shina. If it's asleep, that's what it is. It's like death. The Gemara says when you're sleeping, it's a 60th of death. So it's also a concept of death. So when we said before that this Amunah is B'china Shina, so it's almost like it's dead. And if it's dead, then you don't feel it. And if you don't feel it, that could bring you to do an Aveda. That's why the Shoim are called death, because death is separation from Hashem. Then by im is there's a Koren. If a person would remember, which means is do kvedi. If you remember that the Eibush is your father, then you have kvedi, like the Pasuk said. Im avani aya kvedi, as we said before. If your father, where's my kovet? You don't have kovet for the father. Why don't you have kovet? Because you don't know he's your father. It's asleep. That feeling is asleep. Then says meir b'chinas chochma shebanefesh. When the chochma of the nefesh shines, which means it's not asleep, is ba'chochma tachayeh. It says chochma gives life. See, the lost in can be seruchnis. If you have the chochma makes you alive. Beruchnis. Alive beruchnis means that you're not separated from Hashem. If you have chochma, if you have that feeling of chochma of the bittul and the munah to Hashem, then you will not have misa. And as we said before, even falling in your madrega is also called misa. You wouldn't even have that. Is the Aveda von Ayidin mit dem ganzen Tag if Amunah hecher for Shenoim. Because if you have the chochma shebenefesh, then your Amunah is strong. And if your Amunah is strong, there's no changes. There's no thing, well, you fall down. Because you only can fall down when the Amunah gets weaker. You don't have the Amunah. But if you have the Amunah, the chochma is shining and it's not asleep, it's awake, then you will not fall down. So there answers the question why when it comes to Nachle, it speaks about death. And when it comes to here, when it speaks about person falling down in his madrege, we're talking here in our parsha, we're talking about lowering in his ruch madrege ruchnis, which is also called death. So in both parshas, in the parsha of Nachlas, it talks about death of a person, and the parsha here it talks about also something similar to death because you fall from your madrege. In both cases, the Torah does not mention your father will redeem you because that's your problem. The problem in both cases, why is there death? Because you don't remember your father. So basically, you don't have the father, Begilui. And Bevela, the Torah doesn't mention to teach you that Indian that this is the source of the problem. Just like we said before, when you sell yourself to a goy, So even though it's a Yerida descent in Gashmi, but it's also a descent to Ruchnius, he's verstandig, as Azeh is beneged is Angula. So the same thing is, when it comes to being redeemed, it doesn't only mean redeemed the Gashmias. The Torah talks about the redemption that he should have a Gula. It talks about also the redemption Beruchnius. But Torah zokt on Gula Tialei, when the Torah says he shall have a redemption, as I in the Kravim Muzening Gelzain. In other words, it's the Torah is telling you they must do it. The relatives must redeem him. When it says Gula Tialei Poshav, that means shall have a Gula. But the Rebbe says that also if you touch it, Gula will be a Gula. Torah promises this guy, as low as he is, Beruchnius, he will have a Gula. Just like in Pashtas Pshat, the relatives have to redeem him. It's a chiyuv. That means that it's also a redemption of Ruchnius. I feel him in the cravings and him need Gael, even if his relatives don't do it, you don't have people to come and help him to pick him up Beruchnius, to redeem him, the Gashmis, and redeem him Beruchnius. Is Vayetze B'Shnas HaYevel. The Torah says when it comes Yevel, he will go out. So the end will be he will get out of this situation no matter what. His relatives should do it. If they don't do it, the Torah says he will go out anyway. When the Posik Zog the Rev and Tam, and the Torah says, why is it that we're guaranteed, we know for sure, he will get out of his low situation? Torah gives the reason, because the Yidden are avodim to who? To me. They are my servants. They can be servants. Be'emes, they cannot be servants to others. And as Rasha says, the Lashon Shtori Kedem, which means my document is first. If you have two people claiming that you're my servant, you're my slave, one has a document, an earlier one has another one. So who does it go to? Obviously to the early one, because the second one can't have him if he belongs to the first. David just says, my shtar is Kedem. You are my Eved, not somebody else's. But main dipnimi is. So if you go deeper, it means the Gula Ruchnis from the Shvala Matziv and Belchon Gefinzich. It's talking about the spiritual redemption from his situation, Beruchnis, that he finds himself. So the Eibusha says you'll get out. Why? Because you became my avodim. When did Yidden become the avodim of the Eibusha? Which is before becoming a neber to the goy. When he sells himself to the goy, it's already after he's a neber to the Eibusha by Matan Torah. So the goy really is not his boss. So the end is he'll get out of there. By Matan Torah is jeder Yid geworden an Eved Hashem afebig. By Matan Torah, every Yid became a servant or a slave even to Hashem forever. And Ilui Atzmi was Kenet Kenes V'Mitzunim. At such a great level, something so special, nobody could take it away from him. Even if afterwards he goes against, does the opposite of Hashem's will. He's an Shayches Surah, his connection to that bad behavior, which is symbolized by him selling to himself to Avodah Zarah, which is a bad behavior. That's something in addition to what he really is. Some top superficial addition to what he really is, what his real mahus is. From an etzem mahus, those who say an Eved Hashem, can be beaten better. Because there's his real being, which means, as we said before, the fact that he's an Eved of Hashem, that cannot be changed. The fact is vaday as gulatili, and therefore it's for sure that he will be redeemed. Even though time being, he's still under that low level, but Gashmi, but the Iker is a low Beruchnius, he will get out of it because that's his essence. The mit is verstanding the Shayches to von Sima said to Yaschola. This will also explain the connection to the end of the parasha, to the beginning. We always know the end is connected to the beginning. But the posik is matkish in the beginning of the parasha. The posik expressed by Daber Hashem spoke to Moshe Behar Sinai. The Torah mentions Har Sinai. This is Hagdama to Klolos HaSeder. This is an introduction to the whole Seder. And we know the beginning is an introduction to everything. So not only to the dinim of Shemitah, this is an introduction to everything, including the end. And not even that. The end that has more connection than to the middle, because the end and the beginning, no tzchos and sefer have a connection. Mitzadem was mekumt von Har Sinai. What the Torah is telling us, the beginning says that the Torah was given by Har Sinai. So because we're coming from Har Sinai, but dann at Zechuvkit on the story Kedem, Libnei Yisrael Avodim, that's when the Eibusha got the document that we are his Avodim. Like he said, then Libnei Yisrael Avodim, my Avodim, I feel noch dem ganze say there Therefore, even after the whole order, he goes lower and lower and lower, is Vaday as Gulatili. What does it say at the end? He will be redeemed, he'll come out of it. This could also explain what Rasha says, and Rasha stresses it and goes into length to explain it, that when the Torah says le'eker mishpachas geir, which means he sells himself to Avodah Zarah. So Rashi explains it, like we said before, was meant hanimker l'Avodah Zarah atzmo, that the lowest level is he sold himself to the idol himself. But Rashi explains and length lies lo shamish, to be only serving, to be a shamish, not to him as a god that he is sold, that he now belongs to this God, he's under this God. To chop wood for Avodah Zarah, to draw water. But Rashi says clearly not for as a God himself. The Chur is not understood. How does Rashi know? The pasuk says he sold him to Avodah Zarah. How does Rashi know it doesn't mean to the Avodah Zarah itself? If it's because you're not allowed to do that, you're not allowed to sell yourself to Avodah Zarah. It's also forbidden to be a shamash Avodah Zarah. Even to a goy, you can't sell yourself. So obviously we're talking about a person here that doesn't care. So maybe he sold himself to Avodah Zarah itself. How does Rashi know that it doesn't mean to the Avodah Zarah itself? But the need to avoid that Rashi is telling us because this, as I feel azayid, that even such a Jew was the Arab gefallen as he fell so low, to the lowest descent. God forbid. Because is it's not possible that he sells himself Mamed to give himself over to the Avodah Zarah itself. But thus something impossible, like we quoted before from Tanya, to sell yourself, to give up your and deny Hashem and give yourself under Avodah Zarah, impossible. Because even before he is redeemed, he's a niti namatzev as by him. He's not in a situation that he doesn't have this idea that Eibishter is his father. I we said it does. It is not abgetragen. He's removed and shloft. That's what we said. It's asleep. It's there, but it's asleep. So he's not bottle given in the Chochmah Shebenefesh. The Chochmah Shebenefesh did not get ruined, did not get bottled. As he's not Kedig, Losh Natanya, but like Tanya says, it's asleep. So that's why Rashi, who we're explaining it according to the Ruchnius, and he's telling us he's selling himself to Avodah Zarah. Fine, you could sell yourself to Avodah Zarah to help the Avodah Zarah there to chop wood, but to accept the Avodah Zarah, that's not Shayach. And the far, therefore, when it comes to a test concerning Emunah and believing Hashem Echad in the one Hashem, but the when it comes to the question whether you will accept the Avodah Zarah, which that affects your Chochmah Shebenefesh, when that test comes, it causes that even though it's asleep, it wakes up. And that it doesn't allow, the Chochmah Shebenefesh wakes up and doesn't allow you to accept that Nisoyan. More than that, see, the lost in Tafila Chetzenius, the Kemachshava, Dibur, or Maisa, B'li Emunah, B'li Kval, but is negative Emunah Hashem. It says in Tanya that the Yid Be'etzim does not want to do Avodah Zarah, and he says even more. Even do Avodah Zarah when you don't really mean it. Without the Emunah in your heart, you don't believe in Avodah Zarah. Just to say something that is pro Avodah Zarah, or to do something that you're worshiping, even though you don't mean it, which is against the Emunah in Hashem. A Yid can't do that. Because the Chochmah Shebenefesh would not allow. If it's asleep, you might get an Nisoyan, but then the Chochmah will wake up and not let you. When the far can it sein as each that's why it's not possible each to sell himself to the Avodah Zarah as a god. I feel it's a ton does believe Emunah believe klal. Even to do it without believing in it, you can't do that. The nidigste it was can sein by Yidden and Chochmah Shebenefesh the lowest level that the Yid could reach. When the Chochmah Shebenefesh is asleep, Lula in Abchira, besides the fact of Abchira, and I'll explain it in a moment, is Blaise Farkeif is Shamish, Lach of mind. The worst you could do is to work as a servant in the church, but not to the Avodah Zarah himself. And the Rebbe says this is besides Bchira. The Eibishter gave Bchira. He says in Order 50, because there's a free choice, then the fact is, what the Rebbe is trying to avoid. How come you say it's impossible for a Yid to worship Avodah Zarah, even not even meaning it, but that's also impossible when we see it. It's not like a Yid, people who did it. But the Rebbe says, Be'etzim is not possible. The nature of a Yid is not able to do it. A person has free choice to go against his nature. because David didn't take away free choice. So you could go against your nature. So, but it's not the person himself. If he doesn't want to fight his own nature, he can't do it. Even as in Chochmah Shebenefesh is asleep, but when push comes to shove, so there's a big gay it won't happen. That's what the Pasuk Rashi says. He doesn't sell himself as a god. Now the Rebbe continues. Since we said that we're talking here about a person that to remember and to realize the Chochmah Shebenefesh, this person who sold himself to the Goy, is asleep. So much so that he's not control of himself. As Meshubet of Odem Nochri, he's Meshubet, he's given over under the control of his master, the Goy. The Zora itself is his master, not also it's God, but it's his master because he's working for it. In such a situation when you're so low, you can't get yourself out of it. The rule is, if someone is in jail, can't get himself out of jail. Because he's locked in jail. He's locked in the jail, in his own spiritual jail. So he can't get himself out. Now the Rebbe is going to answer the second kasha. He answered the kasha why he doesn't say father, because this is a person who doesn't have a father. In other words, he forgot about his father. But the other kasha, why does it mention that he could take himself out? He could pay for himself out. Why is that the last? Why isn't it the first thing to do? That's the first choice that you do. But the Rebbe is going to answer. Because if you're in such a matzav, so low, then you're not in control over yourself. If you're not in control of yourself, you can't get yourself out. The gula has to come from above, from outside of him. Somebody who's above his situation. The one that's in his situation can't do it. He can't, from within himself, get himself out of himself. Like the Rebbe once used the lotion. You can't pick yourself up by holding yourself pick yourself by your ears. You have to hold yourself on something outside of you. If you're going to go within yourself, you can't get out of yourself. That was andere, was eine nicht meshubet sein in dem Gel. Could only happen people who are not in that level, not meshubet under the control of the Goyer of David Zora. Only they could redeem him. The far states of Malamesh and the Rinya from Gulas Kraven. That's why first it says the first has to be his relative should redeem him, which is the Sarusa de Leilet, so Arush Lepnim from Zay Shvala Matzah, which is something from above, beyond him, that'll schlep him out, pull him out of his situation. But then the Torah does say that he could get himself out. But after it mentions the people outside could get him out, then it mentions him. So Rebbe says, why? The tachlis is over, but the goal is, nicht as say the darf non kommen zu der Seite des von anderen. That he shouldn't. Others will pull him out, and he'll constantly need to come onto them. That's not the goal. Nor to megala sein pnimius. They schlep him out. Now it reveals within him what he really is. Was is Eved Hashem, and his pnimius inside is Eved Hashem, as we said before. But with them, so after they pull him out, now it brings out within him. Now himself realizes that it's not for him. He can't be so low. Just like we see something that this in Gashmi is the best the best help you could give a poor man. The best doke is to wegstellen in a matzav was darf shemen it onkommen zu bries. Rebbe brings it from the Rambam. The first level of tzedakah is not even to give somebody away some money. Give someone a job. Do something to him that he will now be able to stand on his own feet and won't have to come on to other people. So you pull him out. He's poor. He has nothing. He can't make any money. So you give him money. You give him something. You give him a job. And now you make that. Now he has his own job. He has his own way to stand on his own feet. And the same thing here with Ruchnius. They pull him out from his Ruchnislike Yeride, but it's supposed to make that now he himself feels out of it. That's what the end of the posuk is, that he himself will be able to make it and he will get redeemed by himself. The tachlis from the gulas krevim is the goal of the fact that the relatives redeem him is the roof to us that that he should be able to redeem himself on his own. My time is the Seder from Gulas Krevim and Eifim from Korov Kedem. This is the reason when it does speak about the relatives, it goes in order. Whoever is a closer relative comes first. Why? Since their job is to awaken his pnimis dikeches, his inner keches, and then also which will affect the superficial, the outward keches of this evet. Till he could be able to redeem himself on his own. Therefore, the closer the relative is to the Ebed, is moving us out. Pnimis dike v'zayin the Ashpo and Virkung the Resedes from the Ebed. So the closer he is, it'll have a greater effect in the Pnimis of the Ebed. And since what we're trying to do here is awaken this Pnimis, because in the Pnimis he always have this union that he's Ebed Hashem, but it's the Chochmah Shabbat Nefesh, but it's asleep. So you need some to reach into him deep. The closer you are to him, the easier it'll be to reach. That way it goes in an order who's closer. And then that what they cause is that now he redeems himself. In other words, he also is now on his own outside of this low matzah. The sibiv of the Yerida is merumas mutgesh in the only from the Seder. The possibility and the reason why there could be such a Yerida, a person could go down so low, is hinted and stressed in the beginning of the Seder. The Pasuk says, Kisavei al Oretz, when you come into the land, which means the Pasuk starts, you came into the land. That means because Eden are going into Eretz Yisrael, which is a settled land. A place where you have to behave according to nature. After 6 years, you have to plant, you have to plow. And that's a chiddush at that time when this was said. But they were in the desert. Not like in the desert, they were not connected to any physicality of the world. They ate bread from heaven, the mon, getrunken from Behar Miriam, they drank from the well of Miriam, getrogen levushim, but the Anan Yaakov ham shofim gatzim, and you wore clothes that the Ananim, the clouds of the Eibishter, polished it, cleaned it, God levushim, and the clothes grew with them. These ruchnis dikanyonim. But now that you're going into the land where this won't happen, now you'll have to get involved in the Gashmis. Gitas anort of the Yerida now. This makes it possible that you should go down to, you're getting involved in Gashmis. In the Midbar, that wasn't possible because you were involved only in Ruchnis. That's why in the beginning of the Seder, where it says you are going into Kisavei Loris, you're going into the Gashmasnik land to behave with Gashmas, with Teva, so right away the Torah tells us, as the Bald, from Har Sinai, since you're coming with the Keach you got by Har Sinai, it says that by Har Sinai is a Zicher as that you're sure, at Nit, Norbert, Menaling, Biden Gans, not only you yourself will be complete, you'll have the redemption. You will also bring a redemption, an elevation in the land. As Macht from Eretz Canaan, Eretz Yisrael, you're going to change, you're going to transform Eretz Canaan. This was Eretz Canaan to Eretz Yisrael. When you're in Eretz Yisrael, this is the Shof Sorah Shabbos Lashem, and in Eretz Yisrael, the land will be resting for Hashem. Instead of the fact that before that there was Avodah Zarah in Eretz Yisrael, where you could sell himself. If he sold himself to Avodah Zarah, obviously it's there. So what you pay, because of the Keach of Har Sinai, instead of having the Avodah Zarah, and that's the word Eker, that Eker Mishpachas Geir. It turns Eker into a good word. Taisus says, why is the Avodah Zarah called Eker? But the end will be, it'll be torn out, it'll be uprooted. The whole idea of the Zorah gets uprooted. But the contrary, the land will rest, a resting for Hashem, which means that you could see in a revealed way that the land, the earth belongs to the Eibush.